I'm going to say good evening and thank you for joining us tonight on behalf of all of us at the St. Croix Foundation, along with our partners in the environmental sector of our nonprofit consortium, namely St. Croix Environmental Association, Crucian Heritage and Nature Tourism, and Virgin Islands Good Food Coalition. Welcome. We're incredibly humbled by the response that we've gotten for tonight's virtual community town hall. My name is Deanna James. I'm president of St. Croix Foundation for Community Development. More importantly, I'm a resident, I'm a nonprofit champion, I'm an ancestral Virgin Islander. I think it's important to kick off the evening by providing a little background on the foundation and on our nonprofit consortium, who we are and why we decided to host this event tonight. First and foremost, I feel compelled to say that I really only want to live in a community where when people are hurting, leaders listen and immediately respond to relieve their suffering. These historic moments that we're all living through unquestionably demand courageous leadership, which is why I am deeply honored to say to all of the civic organizations in our consortium, but tonight specifically to the nonprofit leaders in our nonprofit environmental sector, thank you for inspiring us every day with your courage. As a 30-year-old community-based philanthropy, I feel confident in saying that no single other organization in the Virgin Islands has done more to concurrently revitalize and preserve our historic towns, nurture small business development, invest in education reforms, support our civic sector by serving as the territory's preeminent fiscal sponsor, incubating and building capacity for over 250 small nonprofits and grassroots initiatives, all while advocating tirelessly for greater mainland philanthropic investment in the territory. But of all the roles St. Croix Foundation serves in, the one we are most deeply committed to fulfilling is as a trusted, apolitical community convener, nurturing civic engagement and civic leadership. In demonstration of that commitment, back in 2016, the foundation launched a civic collaborative, which we named the Nonprofit Consortium, comprising approximately 30 St. Croix-based nonprofits. Today, almost 5 years later, we are more convinced than ever before that in our community, with so many broken systems and broken promises, nonprofits have the potential to lead this territory by supporting, building, and sustaining healthy, just, and equitable systems. With 4 distinct sectors in our consortium, including arts and culture, health and human services, youth and education, and the environment, tonight's event is being hosted by our small but mighty environmental sector. This event is also a continuation of previous community conversations in the form of an environmental forum, which we held back in May of 2019, in response to the restart of the refinery, and during which we explored the history of heavy industry on St. Croix. Then in November of 2019, 6 months later, we hosted our first community town hall at UVI in response to an early incident at the refinery involving the release of hundreds of massive foam buoys that broke free and littered several South Shore beaches. What we learned from that convening was, first, residents who have lived on an island for over 50 years with major industrial facilities on their doorsteps, one being at one point in history the largest refinery in the world, sadly didn't know critically important protocols for addressing both health and environmental concerns and incidents. We also learned that key stakeholders, i.e. regulators, refinery representatives, and policymakers, were not providing residents with sufficient open forums to obtain important information that could empower them and allay concerns, rumors, and fears. We actually began planning this event over a month ago in response to the first oil release event back in February, which many, if not most in our community, only learned about in a Washington Post article that was published almost a month after the actual event. Since that time, once again, as we were planning this event, we were all quietly waiting for anyone to do what we are doing tonight. No one stepped up to the plate, even as additional incidents releases continued and people suffered and endured incredible hardships over the last several months. So make no mistake, tonight's community town hall is about people. It's about empowering people, It's about getting answers for people, and it's about giving voice to people. But more than anything else, we hope that rank and file community stakeholders will walk away with a greater level of confidence to demand responsive, courageous leadership from all of our leaders in our community, because our people deserve no less, and because open forums like this should be a natural reflex for real leaders during times of crisis. Now to establish the format of our town hall. First, because we recognize that there are a multitude of issues which St. Croix residents are contending, particularly around human health and environmental impacts, and around monitoring and regulatory compliance. For tonight, for this conversation, the questions we are posing to our invited guests are relatively broad. Second, invitations were extended to the following representatives: Department of Planning and Natural Resources, Department of Health, Virgin Islands Territorial Emergency Management Agency, representatives from Lime Tree Bay terminals, members from the 34th Legislature, EPA, and the CDC. Along with those invitations, we developed targeted questions that we felt adequately addressed some of the concerns that we have raised and that have been raised by community stakeholders, and the answers to which may provide greater insight and information to residents. Our questions were submitted to invited guests in advance with a request to attend in person or to identify a representative to attend in their stead. All invitations were followed up with reminders and calls. We have designated a significant time slot in the agenda to field questions from our audience. Throughout the town hall, we will have a member of our team. I think it's Victoria Gonzalez. I want you to remember that name so you can identify it in the drop-down menu of participants, who will be manning the chat. Community members should feel free and comfortable directing questions to Victoria privately if they don't wish to submit questions publicly. Next, I will turn the mic over to our nonprofit consortium partners, Jennifer Valulis, Executive Director of C, who will be followed by our very capable facilitator, Frendel Gerard, Executive Director of Chant, who will provide additional details on the agenda before kicking off our Q&A session. We will wrap up the night with our dynamic food sovereignty expert, Summer Sibley, Executive Director of VI Good Food Coalition, who will close out the town hall after walking us through some next steps and future events. I'm going to turn the mic over to Jennifer.
Okay, good evening to all the community participants and the panelists that have joined us today. I am Jennifer Valulis, the Executive Director of the St. Croix Environmental Association, or C for short. I am proud to be part of the amazing and dedicated group of organizers that are hosting this important town hall event today. In recent weeks, community members have reached out to C and other organizations through calls, texts, emails, social media, personal conversations, an online reporting portal, and any other way they could get our attention to report their experiences around the emissions and accidents at the Lime Tree Bay refinery. People are sharing these lived experiences with us, and it has been tough to hear the serious problems that so many have faced. People are getting very sick with headaches, vomiting, nausea, and respiratory issues, and they are losing their cistern water to oil contamination. Lives are being continuously disrupted from school and office closures. As a resident of Frederiksted myself, I have experienced the panic that sets in when I first get that whiff of sulfur. And I know that soon it will be painful to breathe, the stabbing headache will set in, and I'll have to lay down because I feel sick to my stomach. A common thread through these conversations has been frustration and fear. Frustration that there has not yet been clear answers about what is happening and that no solutions are being offered. And fear that there will be no action to control these fumes and flares and accidents. Most importantly, people have asked about when relief is coming. As a small nonprofit, we don't necessarily have those answers to the questions, but we do have the ability to connect the community to the people with the answers, and that's what we're here to do today. We are fortunate to have guests on our panel who are the experts on the issues and that the community is concerned about. We hope that this conversation can allay some of those fears and frustration, and we hope that there are answers and we just haven't heard them yet. Again, thank you all for coming, and I'm looking forward to a very productive discussion today.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all. My name is Frandel Gerard. I am the Executive Director of Chant, and I will be the moderator this evening. We are really intent on being able to field questions from the audience. And for that reason, we're asking all of our experts and testifiers to be cognizant of time. We will call it on you so that we can move on if we have to. I want to make sure that our participants in this meeting, please post your questions in the Q&A. And if you're on the Facebook Live on St. Croix Foundation site, please post your questions there. Panelists, you've already put your contact information in the chat. We appreciate that. If you haven't, please do if you are open to having our participants contact you directly. So with that, we would like to start with remarks. I wanted to share something actually first. We wanted to get it on the record that it's not just us that are having issues. And I asked permission on a thread that I'm on to just share some of the things that are happening. One woman yesterday, on Wednesday, this stuff is toxic. I now have rashes and I am reporting my symptoms, but come on, this is crazy. What area are you in? She answers Hannah's Rest. I live in town. I have headaches, raw throat, 2 weeks now, nausea when it gets bad. I have sensitive skin, which is now showing rash patches on my face and neck area. Frederickstead town. I am hypersensitive to everything. So it has been bothering me for 3 weeks. I canceled my lease due to the dust and now this. OMG, we are having similar reactions. It's a skin rash. Youngest daughter throws up. Babies are lethargic as well. That's coming from people on a small group chat that I happen to have been invited to. So framing it that way, we'd like to provide some legal experts with a short window to provide us with some basic information. Attorneys Elizabeth Neville, John Wake, and Emily Davis.
Good night, everyone, and thank you so much for having us here and for putting this together, St. Croix Foundation. My name is Elizabeth Neville, and I am the pro bono attorney who has been representing the St. Croix Environmental Association and our team of legal experts in seeking accountability from this refinery throughout the restart. And I wanted to highlight on a high level, this situation really highlights that environmental issues at their core are human rights issues. The ability to breathe, to drink clean water, to live in health. These are fundamental survival needs to be taken seriously. And my heart has been breaking throughout the last week as residents have been suffering so profoundly. So as I mentioned, I'm an attorney. I specifically have a background in environmental law. I am a member of the Virgin Islands Bar and I clerked on St. Croix. My family have been residents for over 20 years. I'm also barred in Florida and California. And since beginning to look at this refinery and the restart, as an environmental lawyer, I had a number of specifically the age of the refinery and the restart protocols, knowing that's over 50 years and that the administration, the prior administration, was seeking to treat it as a restarted facility and not to look at it as a new facility. Looking at the fragility of the ecosystem around endangered species and the vulnerability of this community, this is something we took very seriously in becoming involved with due to the fact of the entrenchment of this facility with the community. As I mentioned, my family have been residents on St. Croix for over 21 years. I was picked up for prom at refinery housing, so I understand very much the position of this. However, I think it really underscores the need for care for community health and safety and protection of our environment above all else. So to briefly sum up our role to date, When the refinery's permits for the restart were first coming through, our group submitted public comments voicing our concerns. Eventually, when the plant-wide applicability limit permit was issued, this is an air pollution permit that would have tethered pollution levels to levels based on Hovenza's heyday as one of the biggest, most productive refineries in the world. We challenged this before the Environmental Appeals Board. And this permit was eventually withdrawn by the US EPA. Another important note is that Lime Tree Bay Refinery also challenged this permit, but it was on the grounds that EPA wished to require them to do monitoring for sulfur dioxide. A very fundamental concern, however, in the restart protocols and with the plant-wide applicability permit is that this sort of permit has a lifespan of 10 years by which the refinery could expand without going through public notice and protocol that would otherwise. And I think the situation at hand and the need for clear communication and community input highlights the need for community engagement. Now, integral to our role is that C and I didn't do this alone. St. Croix Environmental Association and I assembled a team of experts from national nonprofits that have brought expertise to this issue in areas of clean air in RDC in particular, who my colleague John Walk is representing tonight, the Center for Biological Diversity, which is expertise in endangered species issues, Sierra Club, which works on community health and pollution issues, and the Vermont Law School Environmental Justice Clinic, which provide tremendous expertise on environmental justice. There are a number of issues implicated here. The status quo is untenable. This community deserves better. And we are going to continue to liaise with agencies and to be here to stand for this community to make sure that we get a better situation and are able to breathe clean air and drink clean water and live in health. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. For the record, we did invite Lime Tree Bay Terminals and Refinery, and in declining, we'd like to put on the record their response, which was good day. While Lime Tree Bay remains fully committed to being a good neighbor and responsible community partner, we respectfully decline the invitation at this time. Thank you from LB Energy Communications. So we'd like to let you know some of the questions that we posed to them. This is a brief outtake. One, please provide a brief overview of what transpired on February 4th, April 22nd through 23rd, and May 12th, as well as an update on the status of corrective measures resolution. Number two, what are the real-time public notification protocols? i.e., is there an amount or level of a release that would trigger the need to notify the public immediately? Three, does Lime Tree Bay Refinery have the capability and equipment necessary on an emergency basis to identify and quantify specific chemical contaminants released? And fourth, what was the distinction between the February 4th and May 12th events that caused Lime Tree Bay Refinery to notify the public of an operational problem that led to a release? We may perhaps get some of those answered by our other guests. I'd like to now ask our Commissioner J.P. Oriole of the Department of Planning and Natural Resources a few of the questions that were posed to him in writing. Commissioner?
Good morning, Fernando. I mean, good afternoon or good evening, I should say.
Good evening. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. The first question we'd like you to address is DPNR capable of independently monitoring a chemical release episode from the refinery that would generate and provide data necessary to assess whether the release poses an unacceptable health threat to residents?
So currently, DPNR by itself possesses multi-ray units that will allow us to monitor for hydrogen sulfide, carbon monoxide, and VOCs. When we have a large-scale release, however, we also have we also can reach out to our partners like the VI Fire Services Hazmat team, which also has equipment. The Department of Health has equipment, and If the governor chooses to do so, we can activate the National Guard Civil Support Team. And so what we would say is that the government of the Virgin Islands collectively can, in fact, monitor and assess for any kind of chemical release. And we also do have our partners from the EPA that we can request assistance from if necessary.
Did the recent flare events violate visible emission opacity standards?
So during the actual flare event, we deployed the CST, and the readings were still not in those excessive of what the SO2 releases are for facilities. They didn't violate our Title V or national air quality and air ambient quality standards. So, but we still feel that the flaring event, however, did in fact have some impacts beyond just, let's say, SO2 monitoring. And then subsequently, when we requested to have additional data provided from the Lime Tree facility, we started to get numbers in terms of the actual releases, the chemical releases as part of that, and what triggered the flare.
Could you share some of that with us? And what the potential health impacts are of the combined chemical releases?
So we know that there was an exceedance in the release of sulfur dioxide. And in terms of the health impacts, I would prefer that we provide that. I know that the Department of Health had some responses related to the impacts of sulfur dioxide, and we previously, the department through the Joint Information Command Center had also released pamphlets and information regarding sulfur dioxide and the health implications. So we do know that there is irritations. We do know that it can cause nausea, and people are going to have different sensitivities to those to the sulfur dioxide. And so it really will be dependent on the individual's sensitivity, how they're going to react to it.
Thank you. What procedures does DPNR implement when a resident reports an obvious chemical release from a major industry such as Lime Tree Bay Refinery? And how is it investigated by DPNR and DPNR's reporting protocols to the community?
So DPNR has 3 air quality personnel on St. Croix. And so the first thing when we receive a complaint is we obtain where the person is calling from, what is the nature of the complaint. And we try and ask them if they have any specific symptoms, and we also advise them to please monitor themselves and seek medical attention if necessary. But we use that information to begin investigating, and not just limited to one. There are a number of facilities along the industrial corridor there, and we begin to reach out to all of them because they all have reporting requirements to the department if there are any upsets. So using that information, we dispatch our teams to begin to investigate. We try and narrow down what the sources are, and if that if there is an issue that continues to persist, when we now bring in our additional partners by activating the Joint Command, we start to work with VI Fire Service, FITEMA, the Department of Health, and we start to plot and log where all of the complaints are coming from and building a geographic profile and trying to ascertain what the compound or source might be, and then trying to backtrace that to find out where is the most likely location for us to look to identify that source.
And you're in advising the community
So our role, once the Joint Information Command is activated, all of the communications will come through that sort of medium. That's to ensure that we're addressing all of the concerns, whether it be a DPNR and identifying the chemical component or what the source order is, also to address the health aspects and concern of the community. So we make sure that all of that one statement on behalf of the government of Virgin Islands is coming up from the Joint Incident Command.
Thank you. And then our last question is, what was the distinction between the February 4th and May 12th events that caused Lime Tree Bay Refinery to notify the public of an operational problem that led to the release? If you can answer that.
Yeah, that would be a question that would have to be answered by them.
Okay, well, we really appreciate your joining us, and we hope you stay on to answer the questions that are being posed by our participants. They're coming in a flurry, and we will get to them soon. So we'd now like to move to Director Darrell Jackson of Vitima. Only 2 questions for you. What emergency plans are in place? And good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. What emergency plans are in place to inform the community of how to respond in the event of a man-made disaster at the refinery?
Good evening, ma'am. And for the group, the Territorial Emergency Management Agency by TEMA is responsible for coordinating, all events, large and small, that may be multi-agency involved. So we've developed the Territorial Emergency Operations Plan called the TEOP. It's available at our website by tema.vi.gov. You can download that. And we identify basically 6 different areas of concerns with the territory. We talk about anything that may be a pandemic we've been working for last year. Obviously, we have hurricanes, we have earthquakes, tsunamis, a cyber attack, active shooter, and a hazardous chemical release, such as we're dealing with right now. So those are identified in there, but part of this whole activity is forming underneath the National Incident Management System called NIMS. So no matter whether it's small or large, this has been set up throughout other states in order to work together with both local and federal partners, and in some cases, the private sector, to actually do a coordinated activity. So based upon that, we do what's called the Incident Management System, and Commissioner Oreo alluded to that by putting the agencies together with a particular skill set. So starting on the 7th of May last week, we formed a unified command to include the organizations of, obviously, Vitima, Department of Health, Department of Planning and Natural Resources, VI Fire Service, Department of Labor for OSHA perspectives, Waste Management Authority, the National Guard, the Joint Information Center. We also reached out to One Louis Hospital for their subject matter expertise, as well as we brought in our federal partners. So they answered the question. We really formed this together in order to tackle the problem at a perspective that's overall perspective of the agencies that had the abilities to respond to this, small or large. So no matter whether it's Lime Tree Bay, what Diageo, whatever it is, we tackle it from the same perspective as we normally do on a day-to-day basis, or a serious incident that happened this last couple of weeks.
Thank you. And perhaps you can answer this question. I think yesterday people started getting alerts. So what was the distinction between the event that occurred on May the 12th and the events that occurred on February 4th that caused Vitima to notify the public of the operational problem at Lime Tree Bay Refinery?
No distinction from Vitima as far as those 2 separate events, but ultimately, because we had put the unified command together, we had opened up the complaint hotlines, both from Department of Health as the public DPNR, as well as work with the EPA. We wanted to, first of all, make sure everybody that was having these symptoms and having concerns knew who to contact. Vitima is responsible for 911. You can always call 911, but the intent was, first of all, this is about noon. We sent this out before the event. It was after doing the analysis and saying, well, is the word really getting out to everybody in the community? So part of the alert messaging system is prescription based. You sign up for it. So we got it out to about 7,000 people who are interested, just to make sure that they have the information available to them, Monday through Friday from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and then after hours to use 911. Then we had the actual event that happened yesterday, and we had a concern. We wanted to make sure the community was aware that we in the government had understanding of this. We are having coordination with Lime Tree Bay. We involved, obviously, the National Guard, who had been out monitoring for the last several days. We had them out and actively monitoring, like Commissioner Oriole talked about, to make sure if there was a health hazard, we get the word out as quick as possible, working with the Department of Health also from a health risk, and then ultimately to make sure we could get everybody involved, and even fire service available support if they need help and assistance at Lime Tree Bay. So that was really the communication to the community was so important to have them be aware of, that we acknowledge this. We were working with Lime Tree Bay also. If it became important, we would provide you more information.
Well, we really appreciate those answers, and we hope that you will stay with us to provide additional information as more questions come in. And just a note to our participants, I'm seeing a lot of questions going into the chat. If you would please put them into the Q&A so that we can ask them shortly. I'd like to move on to Commissioner Justa Encarnacion of the Department of Health. And thank you for joining us, Commissioner. We appreciate your being here. We do have some questions for you. Are you familiar with the 2014 report, the study of environmental health of the industrial area of St. Croix, that was prepared by the Eastern Caribbean Center of the University of the Virgin Islands, that studied the environmental impacts of residents living in areas exposed to emissions in the industrial South Shore corridor? And if so, do you agree with the results that indicate that residents on St. Croix have been consistently exposed to harmful pollutants in the air, and the results of the study that offered empirical evidence that adverse environmental conditions could lead to declining respiratory health, specifically for the residents in what they refer to as the target area around the South Shore industrial corridor of St. Croix?
First of all, thank you for having all of us here so that we can actually communicate with each of you. Deanna, James, thank you for having us join you. There are some concerns in the community, and I think it's always important, whether we do it in this forum, we do it in the newspapers, in the radio media, TV, as we've done over the last couple of weeks. I think it's important for this dialogue to take place. So thank you so much for that, Frandel. Of course, it's always a pleasure to communicate with you. So I'm happy to be here to answer questions. In regards to my familiarity with the report, honestly, I'm not that familiar with the report. I would have to read in detail on that report. However, historically, you know that the St. Croix in particular, because of Lime Tree Bay, Hovenza, all the names that it has held in the past, has always been a topic of controversy. Of course, you know that our cancer registry is now back up and running, so we're pulling data. Environmentally, from a historical perspective, respiratory conditions have always been a challenge to the U.S. Virgin Islands, as well as in St. Croix. So to reflect and to correlate respiratory illnesses, cancer illnesses, one of the things that our individuals from who run the cancer registry and have done the research have said it's very difficult to pinpoint numbers with specific areas because people move so frequently within a territory. That's just a fact. We do move quite a bit. However, there are some stationary individuals. So we do track and we perform trends as well from that, from an environmental standpoint, in reference to history and what we're doing right now. I think we're trying to change. And someone actually put in the post that President Biden has made eradicating environmental racism a key component. And I think that everything actually is changing now. So what has been the reports that have been placed in the past, what we do today, I think is going to be reflective of what our future is actually going to hold. I have to tell you that Governor Bryan, his team, I have to say that in reference to health, our mission in our Department of Health basically is to reduce health risks, increase access to quality health care, and enforce health standards. That's just a given. It's something that we do every day. We've been actively working practically 24/7 in reference to our COVID pandemic, and will continue to do so. Director Jastian and Commissioner Oriol indicated that we're not working independently. We're not working in silos. We're working collaboratively as a team. We've been meeting 3, 4, sometimes 5 times during the day within the last couple of weeks to ensure that we actually get a hold of what's going on and communicating as much as possible to the community. We've actually reached out to our providers to see if they can provide information to us. We have hotlines available, and we have indication of what those hotlines information has proven. But Fernella, I will definitely delve into that report a little bit more and be able to get that information back to you.
Great. It's hard to find, but it's recently been posted on www.engagevi.org. And I'm sure someone on the team at the foundation can forward it to you.
Not only that, but on our team, actually in our Department of Health team, we have Dr. Donna Christensen, who's very familiar with that and has shared some of that extras with us. So it's just for me to sit down and delve into, and I don't want to give you information without actually doing a deep dive within that report.
Well, we appreciate it because it kind of shapes it because of the way it was done. So is there a registry now collecting the data on the health impacts of the recent activities, emissions, and mishaps, as they call them, that's being kept with demographic data about health, location, age, and also the complaints?
To give you a synopsis, we've had about maybe 218 reports beginning on May 5th. And those complaints have come from various areas. WIM, I think, would be the highest, which would be 28 complaints. The lowest area from what I'm looking at is Pleasant. That would be 3 complaints. And of course, William Delight, Lewis Brown, Grove, Campo Rico had 20. Hannah's Rest had 16. And of course, Prophet around that area, we get some complaints as well. But it's interesting that the individuals living close to that area had the least complaints. Individuals living at the perimeters, especially in the western part of the island, had the most complaints. So about 70% are beyond Adventure going west, very few in the Prophet, Clifton Hill, and Harvey areas. Symptoms, you actually described some symptoms, Jennifer Valiolis, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. She also spoke of some of the other symptoms, and we too have been receiving symptoms. So what we've done, Dr. Tyhan Caesar, our medical director, communicated with our private providers as well as hospitals. So we've been tracking information coming from as many sources as possible. So like 65 or 40.6% of the individuals that shared concern had no symptoms. Of course, headache, like you mentioned, was often a symptom. Difficulty breathing, about 25 of them. One actually called EMS and reported also having a history of asthma. Nausea, vomiting, stomach aches, I think, have been some of the higher ones that we've seen. Burchett itching, irritated eyes, rash, and you spoke about that one person. We actually had 2 people indicated that they were experiencing rash, and those individuals, of course, sometimes are those that have sensitivity to specific allergens. And then on May 5th, 32% reported on May 5th. And so, and then of course it went down. And as the winds shifted also, you actually saw a difference in the number of complaints. Now, looking at the emergency room, because we also connected with ICO Williams, Emma Williams in emergency, and Dr. Joseph in emergency room. And really and truly, we saw about 9 individuals who visited our emergency room. So that's one of the things that we looked at as well. the concerns, the complaints, being able to treat at home versus actually having to present to the emergency room and be treated within the emergency room. So, and we did see some individuals who went to their private providers as well. So that's why we were trying to collect that data. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult, but Dr. Ellis and Dr. Hunt, Dr. Ellis is our territory epidemiologist. I'm sure you've all heard her name as a result of COVID. But she too have been trying to get in contact with the providers and ensure that we have as much information as possible. I hope that helped.
It did. Thank you very much. And then have we been able to track cancer rates? I think you kind of answered that to date that hasn't really been done in that sector.
Yeah, but one of the things is that to note that our cancer registry was down for a bit. It came back up about maybe 2 years ago. And so we're a little behind. So 2018 data is out, 2019 data is coming out soon. So we'll be sharing that data. We did have a increased number of breast cancer and testicular cancer, not specific to any location within the island. Of course, our numbers are territory-wide and not just focused on St. Croix. So we will be breaking down those information a little bit more specific in looking at our future data collection for the cancer registry. We actually have one certified cancer registrar, and we're training another one, a registered nurse that just most recently joined the team.
Thank you so much, and I hope that you stay on as well in the event that there are questions that come that you can best address. We have 2 senators who have responded to the invitation that was sent out to the legislature, Senator Samuel Carrion and Senator Genevieve Whitaker. I'd like to start with Senator Carrion, if possible. Is he on? Yes, he is. Senator, good evening, and thank you for joining us. We can't see you, and you're still on mute. I just want to make sure that he didn't walk away from his device. Senator, you there? Okay, I'm going to move to Senator Whitaker then. Senator Genevieve Whitaker. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I know that you were not in the legislature at the time, but during the August 2018 hearings when the ArcLight agreement was ratified, several mandates were made relative to the Department of Health and DPNR regulatory roles and responsibilities and monitoring capacity. Do you know whether, by the legislature, not in the contract, I'm gonna say that, do you know whether those mandates have been carried out, whether additional funding and resources for DPNR have been provided as they indicated they would be to.
You're muted, friend, Mr. Gerard.
Oh, all of that? I'm muted?
No, just like a couple seconds of it. I heard most of it.
So do you know whether the legislature has in fact increased funding for DPNR for specifically air quality monitoring?
Thank you very much. And I want to again continue to express my gratitude to the St. Croix Foundation, St. Croix Environmental Group, all the nonprofit consortium, Good Food Coalition, everyone who's come together for this town hall. I just want to place on the record too that I, as a senator, of course as a freshman senator as well, have been doing my due diligence in the sense of, for example, tonight would be the first time I'm actually hearing from Commissioner Oriole and hearing from my team director, Jason, because what I did starting last week, first engaging the commissioner to ask that basic question. As a community citizen, and I actually was very much part of those town halls that was organized by the St. Croix Foundation, and the concerns was always over, of course, the monitoring devices. What I understand yeah, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Senate as a collective. I'm speaking as an individual senator. What I understand is that DPNR, and that's the question I asked Commissioner Royal, what is the status of the funds that were supposed to be allocated to DPNR for the monitoring equipment, and so that's where I'm at in terms of that information request. And to that end, that's what I'm following up on. Also by TEMA, really and truly understanding what emergency protocols are being, are being put out. I mean, and again, as I emphasize, there's not a lot of receipt on the part of me as an individual senator of first-hand information. A lot of what I get is second-hand, third-hand, and so right now working as a group, as a body, though. On getting that information collectively and moving towards emergency procedures and the like, in terms of meetings and the like. So, and thank you very much for that question.
Thank you. And I see Senator Carrion has come off the floor and is joining us. Welcome, please. Thank you so much, Senator. We'd like to commend you on your immediate response last week that you issued to the incidences that were occurring. And one of the concerns that has been voiced by the community is the lack of legislative response, despite the fact that the refinery is a product of legislative action. Why hasn't an emergency session of the legislature been called to address community concerns regarding the Lime Tree Bay refinery and the environmental health impacts?
Well, good evening to you, Fernando. Good evening to everyone who's connected to the town hall meeting. As you mentioned, I'm trying to multitask. We're still here on the floor in the Committee on Finance, dealing with some very important bills. I will try to be short. I just would like to add to some of the things that my colleague just mentioned a few moments ago. The legislature has appropriated money to the Department of DPNR, close to approximately between $900 to maybe $1 million for additional staff and for to the purchase of monitoring equipment. So I am aware of that. I collaborated, checked with the chair of the Finance Committee. With regards to your question, I can't really speak in general for the body. I could only speak for myself and initiatives that I have been doing along with my office, which is being in contact with the different government agencies in the executive branch that have a responsibility to oversee and monitor what is happening at Lime Tree. And we've been doing that. We've also been sending letters out and having conversations, not only with Lime Tree, but also with those respective agencies that many of them are present in the town hall meeting. And I will continue to be an advocate and continue to push forward, because I understand that we know that Lime Tree is an industry that is providing revenues to the territory, so economically, but we also understand above everything the importance of the health and well-being of our people, and that comes first, and that will be our position. We'll continue to speak to our colleagues. I understand that there are some initiatives being done, and I'm sure that the public will be aware of that as they put that information public.
Thank you so much for that. And we appreciate both of you showing up for this, and hope that you can stay tuned to hear the questions. I inadvertently skipped someone earlier, so I'd like to go to Attorney John Walker, or is it Walk? Is he on?
Yes, Mr. Ard, it's Walk.
It's Walk. How are you? I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right.
So if you would take a minute or two to share with the community the work that you do and who you represent and what you're offering the people.
Thank you. I work for a nonprofit environmental group in Washington, D.C. I have been a Clean Air Act attorney for 28 years, including at the US EPA. What I want to note is that what island residents are suffering and being sickened by since Lime Tree's restart is not normal. It's not acceptable, as EPA Administrator Michael Regan said last night on Twitter. What The island is experiencing is harmful air pollution, toxic chemical releases. It is not just odors. The Federal Clean Air Act is a powerful law, but it must be enforced in order to protect people. I want to make 3 quick points during my brief remarks. EPA has launched one enforcement lawsuit against Limetree over the failure to operate the sulfur dioxide monitors, but plainly more needs to be done. And that's because of the events that have been happening on a regular basis now. The law gives EPA authority to step in under the Clean Air Act to stop dangerous air pollution when there is, quote, an imminent and substantial endangerment to health. What's been happening on St. Croix is a textbook case of that endangerment, and we need EPA to exercise its authority. Second, after being effectively shut down for over 8 years, you woke up when Limetree restarted with the equivalent of 30 or more major polluters pouring air pollution over St. Croix. Now, if Limetree had been 30 different companies under the law, each of them would have been required to use the best air pollution cleanup equipment. Limetree is not using that best cleanup equipment or being required to use it. And again, EPA needs to do more and require that equipment. The third and last point is that EPA this week brought better air pollution monitoring equipment to St. Croix. I think it arrived yesterday. That is a good thing, and we should thank them. But EPA will not keep that equipment on the island forever. Maybe a few weeks, maybe longer, we don't know. What St. Croix needs is sophisticated air pollution monitoring that can detect many more hazardous air pollutants from Limetree than just hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide. Monitoring that can be operated by independent experts at the university with results reported promptly to the community, not by Limetree, but by experts who are going to tell you the truth. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing our other speakers and answering any questions in the Q&A that attendees may have. Thank you, Ms. Gerard.
Thank you so much, Attorney Walk. And that was timely because next up are the representatives from EPA. We have with us Walter Mugden, who's the Acting Regional Administrator for Region 2, Pat Evangelista, the Director of the Superfund and Emergency Management of Region 2, Anita Williamson, Senior Advisor to the Regional Administrator, Rick Ruvo, Director of Air and Radiation Division, Dave Klusner, Director of Strategic Programs, and Michael, I'm gonna say Pop.
That's correct.
Okay, see, my English teachers would be proud. Air monitoring expert with the EPA Emergency Response Team. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate that you are here. So I'm gonna ask a question and whoever's the expert in the area will respond. When was Limetree Bay Refinery found in violation of the Clean Air Act and why?
Thanks very much, Ms. James and Ms. Gerard, and thank you for having us and for hosting this very excellent program. So just to introduce myself, I'm Walter Mugden. I'm the Acting Regional Administrator for US EPA Region 2. Region 2 covers New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands, along with 8 federally recognized Indian nations that are within New York. Let me just start by saying, I'm going to get to your question, I guarantee it, but I want to start by saying, and EPA Administrator Michael Regan said this last night in his statement. What we've been seeing here is unacceptable. There have been 4 incidents, major serious incidents in the last 3 months. We have the February 4th oily mist incident. We have the April 22nd, 23rd SO2H2S incident. We have the May 5th and 6th incident from the coker, which probably released certain hydrocarbons. And then we have the flaring incident yesterday that had these very dramatic photographs with the fireball. This is unacceptable. And as Mr. Walk said, it is not how a normal refinery operates. So what our administrator said yesterday is we're going to take all appropriate action to make sure that when this refinery, when and if this refinery starts operating again, it will be doing so in compliance and in an appropriate way. Also, as Mr. Walk said, the Clean Air Act is a very powerful law. It provides us with many enforcement tools. They're all on the table. The agency doesn't speak about enforcement actions ahead of time. When we issue an enforcement action, of course, we will notify everybody, but we don't we don't do that until we are ready to actually go ahead and issue the enforcement action. The question that you specifically asked is, what about that action that we took? And also Mr. Walk mentioned this as one of his first points. On April 30th, we did issue to Linetree what's called a notice of violation under the Clean Air Act that notified the company that they were in violation because they had failed to reinstate the SO2 monitoring network that had been required back when Hovenza was operating, and that obligation was inherited by Limetree when they acquired this facility. There are 5 fixed locations in the communities around the facility where these SO2 monitors have to be operational. They were not. So we issued the notice of violation. I also spoke to the CEO, Mr. Rinker of Limetree on that same day, on April 30th, spoke to him again on May 4th. Let me be candid that the company has a different legal view. They do not believe that they were obligated to run these monitors. We think that they're wrong. We're confident that they had that obligation, but I asked Mr. Rinker to set aside the legal differences that we had and to operate those monitors and get them back in operation. And on the 5th of May, he did commit to do so. And I think the Virgin Islands government had also made that same request. Commissioner Oriol and his colleagues had made that same request of Limetree. However, that's going to take some time for Limetree to get those monitors up and running. They aren't something you just can pick up off the shelf at the hardware store. The monitors that are in there haven't been operated for a decade. They are surely no longer functional. They need to be replaced. There's logistic issues. The power needs to get put on, things of that sort. That's why we have brought our own monitoring equipment down. We had our monitoring team arrive on island on the 8th of May, which was last Saturday. And then our equipment actually arrived on Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday morning. We're now in the process of trying to get of installing it. There's a lot of logistic elements here. We need power. We need internet connection because the monitors communicate through internet back to our offices and to where we're picking up the data. We needed to get legal access to the locations, these same 5 locations that originally the Hovenza network was in, and where the Limetree Bay network will once again be installed. There were several different property owners that owned the different locations. My understanding now, we have all those access agreements. We've already started to install some of the equipment. It's going to be a few days yet before the equipment is installed, calibrated, and we are able to start retrieving data. When we do that, the data will be shared with the Virgin Islands Department of Health. And we also have identified threshold levels for the sulfur dioxide and for H2S that would suggest a moment where if the actual emissions reach a certain level, that there should be an alert issued or other action should be taken of that sort. So we haven't got all that organized quite yet. We're in the process. We're having literally daily meetings with the Department of Health, with our own colleagues in the federal government at the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, which is ATSDR, as part of the Centers for Disease Control, CDC. So we're having these daily meetings to work out those protocols, and we're very, very pleased that we have the strong interaction with the Virgin Islands government on this. We've also been in frequent communication with Commissioner Oriol and his colleagues. His colleagues joined us when we were there on April 30th for an inspection, and we were then also on the following week, the week of May 3rd, we were there for a different kind of an inspection. We've been in communication, the Commissioner and I and our colleagues very frequently. So the notice of violation on April 30th was a comparatively minor element. I mean, it was very, very important, absolutely critical to get the SO2 monitors operational for the long term by Limetree, but it's only one small step, and there's a lot more that has to be done. We have a lot of concerns. As I said at the outset, these incidents are totally unacceptable. We need to get to the root cause of what was going on with them and make sure that there's proper management and oversight to ensure that it doesn't happen again. We also set up a telephone hotline. I think it went operational on Saturday the 8th. In the subsequent 4 days, between Saturday the 8th and I guess yesterday morning, so maybe 4.5 days, we had over 300 calls to that hotline. So that's an awful lot of calls. And that was during a period of time when these unusual events or these extraordinary incidents weren't occurring. This was at times when those events weren't specifically occurring. And nevertheless, we had person after person after person who was relating to us the odors that they were smelling, but more importantly, the physical and medical symptoms that they were experiencing. So just like you heard from Commissioner Encarnacion and Commissioner Oriol, we're gathering the data that these folks are sharing with us. We're getting locations where they are, times of day when these events were experiencing, how long it was being experienced, what kinds of odors, because each of the different pollutants that we know are have been emitted at one time or another they have different distinctive odors. So H2S, hydrogen sulfide, smells like rotten eggs. The sulfur dioxide that we've been talking about has a strong sulfur smell, similar, some people say it's similar to what you smell when you strike a match, which of course old matches had sulfur in them. We had the odors from the event last week, on the Wednesday and Thursday of last week, were described maybe as more gasoline-like odors. So we're trying to get from the individuals who are reporting their experiences to us, what are they smelling? Because that can help us identify what might be going on at that particular time that is occurring. We're going to be sharing all of this data with the Virgin Islands government, with Commissioner Encarnacion and her team. We have to be a little careful. We have legal obligations that we need. There's certain data that we have to protect. We can't be giving out people's names and telephone numbers, but we can indicate either by census tract or by some other, or zip code or some other way, we can indicate where the people who are reporting symptoms or whatever are located. It's very similar to what you heard from the commissioner, where she was talking about different locations where people were reporting. So that's a long answer. I know you had a very specific question, but I wanted to make sure that we could set it into a larger context.
Well, we appreciate that. And I'd like one follow-up. We're watching the time because we want to make sure that, there are over 50 or so questions that have come in, that we can get to some of them. Will the EPA be going into the refinery to thoroughly examine the facility due to the speed, the time and the age of lime tree? Will that sort of inspection be done by the EPA?
Yes, there will be multiple inspections. As I indicated a moment ago, we've already had 2 visits. One that was a day-long visit on the 30th of April. We were there to get some information about there at that time had been 2 incidents, the oil incident back in February, and then the H2S SO2 incident on April 22nd, 23rd. We wanted to get some direct information about those. We also took the same occasion while we were there to do an inspection of certain oil pollution rules. Obviously, this is a facility that has a large amount of petroleum product. They are subject to detailed obligations under EPA's oil pollution rule. We wanted to identify how their status of compliance was on that. We had already issued a notice of deficiency to the company on some of those oil issues a few weeks earlier. We wanted to follow up with an inspection. We did that on the 30th. Then on the week of the 3rd, we were there with a large team, including a specialized team from EPA's, actually works out of EPA's headquarters office, called the National Enforcement Investigations Center, NEIC. And that team came out to help us and to help DPNR do a detailed inspection of the company's water discharge issues, water permitting issues. That had been planned months earlier, and so it had nothing to do with these recent emissions incidents. It's just coincidental that it happened at more or less the same time. But more importantly, we have other inspections already in our planning process. So we won't be saying ahead of time what we're going to be doing and when we're going to be doing it, but we guarantee you that we're going to be there with very substantial inspections in the weeks and months to come.
Well, thank you so much. And do you have a methodology that you will be able to use to determine what emissions we were exposed to in the past when there was little to no monitoring being done?
So by definition, those events are in the past, and they occurred when there wasn't a lot of or any monitoring going on. So I guess strictly speaking, the answer to your question is no, not with precision. But what we can do, well, first of all, we know a lot. We know that in the February 4th incident and the May 12th incident, in both of those cases, actual oil droplets were being discharged from the flare stack. the source of the problem that caused those might have been different. We have some information about what the cause of the February 4th incident was or how it came about. We don't yet have, at least I'm not yet aware of information that is dispositive about how yesterday's event occurred. But what we do know is that in both instances, oily mist came out, oil droplets came out. It settled on people's homes, on their cars, in their gardens, got into their cisterns. So we have that information. And we know that that is not a good thing. We know that people should not be drinking water from the cisterns that were affected in that way, and they need to be cleaned and they need to be tested to make sure that they're properly cleaned. We know that the April 22nd, 23rd incident involved a combination, almost certainly a combination of H2S and SO2. In both cases, we know, and you heard earlier from some of the other speakers about what the potential health impacts of H2S and SO2 are. They're well known, well documented. In the case of SO2, sulfur dioxide, EPA has for decades had something called a National Ambient Air Quality Standard. For example, there's a 1 hour standard for how many parts per million of SO2 can be acceptable in the ambient air, which means the air that we all breathe when we're walking around or in our homes or whatever. And these monitors that I spoke about earlier, the monitors in the 5 fixed monitoring locations, the ones that Lime Tree Bay should have been operating and now has committed to operate again once they get the equipment on board, those are intended specifically to determine compliance with those national ambient air quality standards, which are health-based standards. We do not have such a national ambient air quality standard for hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide is regulated in other ways. However, what we do have for hydrogen sulfide is pretty well-established indications at different ambient air quality level, at different levels of H2S in the ambient air that we're breathing, what are the likely kinds of symptoms or conditions that will occur. So that has enabled us, working with the Virgin Islands Department of Health and working with our colleagues in ATSDR, they've been able to provide us with threshold levels that we can compare to the H2S monitors that EPA is now also bringing in. So I mentioned earlier, and actually Mr. Walk mentioned, that EPA has brought in monitoring equipment. We're installing it right now. It's not only SO2 equipment, but it's also H2S equipment. So we will start to get some information, and we'll be trying to share. We'll also be sharing that threshold data, that information about what kinds of thresholds we see as being of concern, and those will be shared with the public, of course, but first with our colleagues.
Well, I would like to thank you and your team for being here, and I'm sure there are some questions that are going to come up that your expertise will be needed. We had a request, and we're really happy to have on the call representatives from the ATSDR, from the CDC, Charles Edge, Leah Graziano, Elizabeth Irvin Barnwell, and James Gooch. Welcome, and thank you so much for reaching out and joining us today. We do have a few questions. Whoever chooses to respond, that would be fine. I think you're all on, right? So as it pertains to the noxious gas release, what independent data has been collected by the CDC or is being transferred to the CDC in terms of the number of reports, demographics, and symptoms? And maybe you can explain the CDC's current involvement with what is occurring on the island.
So before they answer, I'm going to give a prefatory remark. The data, whatever data there is not going directly to them. If there's, to the extent data has been gathered, and very little data has so far been gathered for the reasons that we've talked about. But as the data starts to get gathered, the primary place in which it's going to lead is to the Virgin Islands Department of Health. ATSDR and CDC's role, as they can explain it further, has been to essentially serve as a technical consultant to us to help us establish what these threshold levels are that we need. Where is it that we need to exercise concern? At what moment, for example, should an alert go out to people and things of that sort? But with that preface, let me see if our colleagues from ATSDR would like to add anything.
Thank you.
Hi, yeah, good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting us to the meeting. I don't really have anything further to add other than what Walter has said. When the data is being gathered from EPA, we'll be receiving that along with the Department of Health, and we'll be able to review that data in terms of the community and health concerns and health effects. So we'll continue to work with the Department of Health and VITEMA and DPNR and EPA and for the community in St. Croix.
Thank you for that. And are there is there any information that can be given regarding the toxicity of the sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and what the short-term and perhaps long-term effects are? Are any of these toxins indicated in causing cancer or autoimmune diseases that the community should be aware of?
Sure. Yes, we do have that information. I'm going to defer to our Office of Emergency Management representative with ATSCR, Charles Edge, and he's happy to discuss that. We've also given that information to the Department of Health, and Commissioner Encarnacion, if you would like to speak to that, I defer to you, but we're certainly happy to take that question.
Hi, this is Charles Edge with ATSDR, Office of Emergency Management. Just to go over sulfur dioxide, I'll hit on sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide and discuss some of the health effects. Sulfur dioxide, as mentioned before, pungent gas, similar to a burning match smell. High levels can be life-threatening. But burning of the nose, throat, breathing difficulties, severe air obstructions can occur with exposure to SO2. Long-term exposure to persistent levels of sulfur dioxide can cause lung function changes. Asthmatics have been particularly sensitive to the respiratory effects of low concentrations of sulfur dioxide. There have been no studies that show that SO2 causes cancer. Moving on to hydrogen sulfide. It's a flammable gas, similar to the smell of rotten eggs. Exposure to low concentrations of hydrogen sulfide can cause eye irritation, nose irritation, throat irritation, similar to SO2. May cause some difficulty breathing for some asthmatics. Very high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide can cause respiratory distress and also can affect the nervous system. Low exposures, low concentrations of hydrogen sulfide may cause headaches, poor memory, tiredness, and balance problems. That refers to the nervous system effects. Brief exposures to high concentrations of H2S can cause loss of consciousness. In most cases, people are able to regain consciousness without any other effects. In some individuals, there may be permanent or long-term effects, such as headaches, poor attention span, poor memory, poor motor function. And H2S has not been shown to cause cancer in humans as well. That's all for the those health effects. If there are any questions, I can address those as well.
Well, we appreciate that. And given that, we've been talking about the two types of chemicals, there are other chemicals that undoubtedly are being released. Are there any combinations of chemicals that may occur from these types of emissions that could exacerbate the damage to the community? And just so folks know, we hope you can stay on an extra 15 minutes because we want to get the half an hour in for questions. Charles?
At the time, at this time, EPA is still gathering data to see what was actually being emitted from the facility. So until we have that information, it's hard to kind of distinguish what's happening. We just only have data about, well, not data, but we only have information about what was released in the previous events. So any further information, we'll have to wait until data is collected.
Thank you. We appreciate that, and we hope you stay on. Now, we'd like to begin addressing some of the questions that have come in. We'd like to start first with a member of the nonprofit consortium, Dr. Chinzira Davis Kahina. Jonathan, you've got her in?
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us.
So I'd like to start first and foremost to share, I'm speaking as an individual person that has native ancestral connections to this space we call II St. Croix. I'm a mother and a grandmother, wife, sister, auntie, etc. And I'm starting in that place with a vote of thanks always being extended to the St. Croix Foundation for being open to hearing what people have been saying. I come from a space, and I live west. Let me make sure I add that too. So when persons speak of what Lime Tree is doing, what Hovensa did, what Hess used to do, what was tolerated here, the first thing that comes up is that many persons have been at hearings and testimonies. We've come before the EPA. So while we're grateful that this very eloquent language of what's being done and what was purchased last week and what was delivered here now and what monitors are going to be done, people are dying. People are being harmed. Our children are suffering. I could remember teaching at Central High School back in the early 90s, and the nosebleed situation that we couldn't explain and the smell. So it's very difficult to now come to this space again, 30 plus years later, to have persons, why are they being able to operate without monitors? Why are our agencies meeting, but it's not shutting down a refinery that's killing people? Ultimately, we're not going to even, some of us won't be alive to know whether or not these emissions from 2021 are the reasons that so-and-so got cancer or so-and-so stopped breathing in the middle of the night. We're going to think it's SIDS killing children when it has everything to do with the lack of accountability for every single, and I say it publicly, again, I'm speaking individually. Do not connect me to any place I work, etc. Make sure we understand that. It is time, if you are violating environmental health standards, shut down Lime Tree Refinery, period. This is not a question, this is not an ask. If we have to exercise a cease and desist order, those of you that are legally engaged can deal with that portion. But the people, it's getting to a point, it's like our side or Iron's side. People know what that means here in St. Croix. This is becoming uncomfortable to a point that it feels like we have to put out hashtags like we can't breathe. We have to put out hashtags, stop killing us. We have to put out hashtags to just get people to hear what is happening here in a place that is supposed to be America's paradise. And I want people to simmer on that. Please simmer on that. Meditate and pray on that. That people were smelling things and nothing was said. There was no microphone in the street. Shut your windows, drink more water, have lunch, nothing. So if people seem a little bit irate, a little bit uneasy, I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. I watched my grandchildren start to cough in a way that's not customary. I've met people that have, and I won't share that today, but it's on social media, people that have been crying out with what's going on here. And all I'm suggesting is that there has to be some degree of accountability. And there has to be some degree, if you're doing something evil and strange and wrong, shut it off until you properly research exactly what's going on. They should have never been allowed to be here. And again, there are records, testimony from the few that spoke up, even if we were ostracized, even if people thought we were crazy and we weren't into development. That wasn't the point. The environmental health and wellness of the people of St. Croix and the entire Virgin Islands, because we forget what happens here is going to affect the entire region. And that's what I ask of you, more skilled and knowledgeable scientists, and especially to those persons that are hearing and seeing this. If they're not being accountable, and to every single senator that allowed this to take place, they were made accountable by record. It's in the testimony. And anyone that would like to see those testimonies, they're readily available. I'm really praying most humbly that we can see a shift, a significant shift, so that the environmental health and wellness, the same way we're changing everything and putting on masks and staying 6 feet apart and washing our hands for COVID-19, this is what's surrounding COVID-19. I gonna say it. You want to tell everybody to vaccinate till vaccine can't finish? Deal with the air. We can't breathe. With that in mind, I'm going to save the balance of my comments. I think persons know exactly how I feel. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share. And I hope that we are being heard and actions take place, because the people are tired, not tired, tired. Shut it down. Thank you very much, Sister Queen Eldris Frandell.
Ashe. Thank you. And see, I promised I would keep my stuff done today. I'm a moderator, so thank you. Thank you all. And now on to questions. Essence, I need your guidance here. Do you want me to pick and choose, or are you gonna do this for me?
So Frandell, actually, this is Jonathan. You can go ahead and pick some questions from the Q&A. We do have questions that have come in from Facebook as well, that I will, if you give me a few moments at the end of going through the Q&A, I'll post some questions from Facebook.
Okay, I'll start with an easy one. Thank you. Can anyone provide information on the shutdown, the timeline? When will their operations be paused? And since it appears that it was a voluntary shutdown, EPA, DPNR, Commissioner, you want to go first, or?
Sure, I can. So it was a voluntary shutdown. However, again, we are actually reviewing different parameters for which the government of the Virgin Islands wants to see certain parameters in place before they resume. So we are in touch with the EPA, going through different options and what that would look like, because we do feel that before any refining operations were to resume, and so they ceased all refining operations yesterday, that there needs to be some demonstration that some of these repeated events, particularly the four that Administrator Mugden mentioned, that they have in fact corrected those issues. And so we're going to be looking at what's the best way, what's the best vehicle avenue we have to enforce those provisions, and then for them to come back and demonstrate that they have in fact addressed those issues significantly enough so that they do not have any repeat events in the near future.
Thank you for that. And I just want to make sure that we understand that we're also framing this as an environmental justice issue. And you know, where the majority of the people being adversely impacted are Black, brown, and poor. And that's been the case for the last 50 years with that industrial corridor. I have a question. Is Commissioner of Health, I don't know if you can answer this, but is the Juan Luis Hospital prepared and equipped to respond to an emergency where people are being affected by the gases and the chemicals?
We have actually been in communication, close communication with ICO Williams. She's actually on most of the meetings we have on a daily basis. In terms of capacity, that's one of the discussions we've been having quite frequently. Juan Luis Hospital, of course, has challenges, most recently air conditioning challenges, and they had to shift some of their areas in which they provide care. However, they've always been flexible. They've always been able to accomplish the task. There are also other areas within the hospital that if we have to introduce a surge, which I pray that we don't have to, there is the capacity to do that. And we do have clinical backup from our contract that we do have with Pafford if the need be. We also have federal support within the territory. VA National Guard has always been a strong support as well. So I think that if that's supposed to occur, of course, our emergency management team under Director Dara Jashin kicks in, and our EOC is stood up, and we assist the hospital as much as possible. So I always go back to say we can't do it alone, we do it together, but we've been able to accomplish a lot. So we do have some availability if a surge is needed. We pray that it isn't.
Thank you. And that underscores our vulnerability, given that our hospital has not been able to perform at maximum capacity since Hurricane Maria in 2017, right? Another question, perhaps Mr. Mugden and the team from EPA can answer this, and Commissioner Oriole, you know you're on the hot spot. Is there any plan to obtain air quality test and cistern test for contaminants in the Adventure Hill area and further away, you know, they said Enfield Green, that's and SO2 air and land and water pollutants. This emission was airborne, hit roofs, hit the soil. Are our fruits and vegetables safe? And is there any mechanism for people to have their water tested in areas that Lime Tree has not said were affected by the oil spill last night or oil spray flow?
Whether our colleagues from the health department and Virgin Islands Health Department have observations to share on that issue.
Randall, could you repeat the question, please?
Are there any plans for the testing of the water and air in the Adventure Hill area, or testing of the soil for contaminants from these series of events? The person is saying it's having an impact on the health of the animals as well as the humans in the Adventure Hills area.
Okay. So you actually, you're speaking now about several agencies coming together to see what we can do. Those kind of questions, those kind of answers actually is what we're looking for to see what we can do best. The Department of Health is responsible for tests and cisterns, whereas, of course, agriculture would be looking at with animals. And so I think that this is a conversation that needs to continue, needs to be had. And so it's, you know, one of the things that the shutdown has allowed us to do is step back and see exactly what type of research needs to be done and actually put some action in place. So these are some of the things that we need to look forward to. So as we get information like that, decisions will be made.
Okay, we appreciate that. And I understand that the CDC ATSDR has some very good tools. So we'll be sending in the summary. You got to sign. We'll be sending in a petition shortly.
If I may also, Department of Health actually we have a certified public health lab within a territory. The first ever certified lab within a territory. And Dr. Brett Ellis is actually certified to run equipment and supplies that he have. Environmental health is one of the things that he can actually test. So that's one of the things that we'll be working with DPNR to ensure that our material that we already have can be utilized.
That's good to know. Another question is the EPA going to address the oil that's been leaking in the ground since the 1980s? And are you aware whether any remediation was done in determining where that oil was leaking and whether oil leaks have stopped?
Yes. There was a very large amount of oil that leaked into the ground. That has stopped. Actually, the Environmental Response Trust that was established as part of the Hovenza bankruptcy has taken over from Hovenza the obligations which have been in place for many, many years. They're constantly pumping and pumping and pumping out the oil product that is underground. It's being brought up and dealt with, but there's still years of that ahead of us.
And the volume is not increasing with the operation?
We have no reason to believe that there's any ongoing leakage.
Okay, that's a good one. Comment here, thank you to the gentleman from New York from EPA. The question is, why were these monitoring devices that arrived last Tuesday not already installed prior to this latest incident?
As I said, we made the decision to bring them to the island last week when we learned that Limetree had committed to reinstitute the SO2 monitoring network, but that it was not going to be able to be done quickly. It would take a number of weeks. So we said, all right, we can get equipment down there very quickly. And so on last, I think Thursday or Friday, we made the decision, put the human team on the plane. They were down there on Saturday, and we got the equipment down there on Tuesday and Wednesday. It now takes a little while to get the access to the facilities, get the facilities up in the physical spot where these monitors are going to have to be to make it suitable to run the monitors and to get the monitors installed and calibrated.
Okay, we appreciate that. One quick question. Are you able to sample from the emission stack itself? And will you be doing that?
So we don't do that, but Limetree is under obligations under their various permits and the regulations to do a lot of in-facility monitoring, in-stack monitoring and in-facility monitoring. So for example, although there's no H2S monitoring as yet obliged, they're not obliged at this time to do H2S monitoring in the community, something we're going to be looking at. They are obliged to monitor the sulfur, the hydrogen sulfide as it moves through the system, and that is information that they are obliged to collect. They have other emission obligations. They have a lot of permit limits on the emissions and on the operations that they have to monitor all the time, and that's information that we'll be gathering. And we did actually issue several legal information request letters, one at the beginning of April, another one at the end of April, that have ongoing obligations for providing us with information. And so those are outstanding as well. We'll be getting that data as it comes in. Those letters, by the way, we have a website that we stood up, which is available to the public, and that has a lot of the information already on there. That is, for example, we have permits on there and things of that sort. Those information request letters, I think, have been posted there as well.
We appreciate that. One question, what do we do when we're affected by the Limetree emissions? The schools in the neighborhood I live in, we have been awakened for the past 2.5 years by foul smells between 2:30 a.m. to 4 a.m. The only thing I can ask that person to do do is maybe give us more detail about the area they live in. But is there now a unified protocol that's going to continue for reporting through the Department of Health, the EPA, and DPNR? Or is that just the emergency response now?
So certainly the data that is going to be gathered by our equipment that we're installing as we speak, that data, as I said earlier, is going to be shared with the Virgin Islands Health Department, with the DPNR, our own colleagues in the ATSDR will be involved in that as well. But that is what I spoke about earlier, that sharing of data. And the data, we have to figure out how to make the data available in a way that's useful to the public, because it's huge amounts of it. We have these 5 different locations, 2 monitors in each location, H2S and SO2, and they take data readings in 10-minute increments. So in a given day, you get just this huge amount of data. And so we have to figure out the most effective way to provide that, first of all, to our governmental colleagues, but also to the public. So that's what we're working with right now.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wanted to comment on that? We're good.
Comment on that only because I don't think that the question that you asked in reference to, is this going to be something that's consistent going forward? Our environmental health as well as DPNR, we do have access, provide access to the community to call, not just for what's going on at Lime Tree, but any environmental health issue. So I will make sure that we have that information in the chat in a short time. That is not just because of this incident, it's something that we just do on a daily basis. And I'm sure that Director Jashin might be able to provide, or DPNR Commissioner Oriole as well.
So I'll just reiterate, Frandel, that again, it's not just the incident or the standing up of the incident command that we are taking calls. When we can think of several other instances while the refinery was shut down, Operation Breathe Easy with the pipeline issue that happened several years ago, and then in 2019, once again, sewage disruptions, fires from the landfill. Like, we receive calls, and our public information offices within DPNR work also with the public information officer for the Department of Health, coordinating location, symptoms, following up, and if need be, when the Joint Incident Command is stood up, then all of that starts to spread around the entire group, and centralizing that information as well.
We appreciate that. So in the chat, folks, there's some links to websites, and we are going to preserve the chat. But I got to as many questions as I possibly could. We're going over it by an extra 15 minutes. But what we'd like to do is, one, I really appreciate everyone showing up, but we have a final question. Based on the community feedback, the trust of the community has been breached. How can residents trust that their concerns are being taken seriously? And may I add, how can we trust that the data and information that we're being given is coming in a timely manner? So all of you can take a swipe. I guess I should begin with Commissioner Oriole and Representative and Mr. Mugden.
Well, I guess I'll try and start that. I mean, one of the tenets of even the Brian Roach administration is to restore the trust of the people to the administration with its government, and the administration takes that very seriously. We realize that there is, there's a lot of history regarding this facility, no matter who owns it. But there's a lot of history, and if it's going to operate, it must operate without affecting the people of the Virgin Islands, all of us that live here. I think, one of the things that I can say is even while this may be a voluntary shutdown, I want to let everybody know that the highest forms of government for the Virgin Islands are responsible for making sure that this facility was not operating after yesterday. And so I believe that Acting Governor Roach, Governor Bryan, they saw that this was continuous. They spoke with the refinery individuals. They want to make sure that the people of the Virgin Islands are put first. The health of our residents is key. And we know that because of the history with this facility, it may take some time before there is trust. And we are committed to doing what is necessary, to putting the things in place that restores that trust in the people. And I think that it's going to be difficult. I think that Lime Tree also is going to have to play a large role in restoring that trust with the community, or proving that it is not what the history of that facility is. And so the government of the Virgin Islands is prepared to do its part. Again, we know that that is something that is going to take a long time for our residents to believe in. But I can say for sure that we all live here. I have employees that live in Wim, Carlton, Frederiksted, all of these areas that are affected. And so it's not something where it's not personally affecting us. We have families also. We are Virgin Islanders first and foremost. And so the health and safety of our community includes our own personal health and safety. And we want to make sure that we are doing not only for ourselves, but for each other. And so all I can do as the head of DPNR is pledge that we do take the trust of the community very safely. We want to endeavor to make sure that we are all safe to freely enjoy our Virgin Islands, and we'll do everything that we possibly can in order to do so.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Maybe I can just add to that. What Commissioner Oriole said is exactly right, that rebuilding trust when it's been lost is very difficult, and it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that we have to meet. President Biden has identified environmental justice as one of his very key concerns, and that's been mentioned earlier in this evening's program. My administrator, my boss, Administrator Michael Regan, head of the EPA, is also very, very focused on this. And he is particularly focused on the events in Lime Tree Bay. That was exemplified in his comments yesterday. But I have now spoken to him multiple times personally. He has asked for briefings. He has given us direction. And he has insisted that this is a extremely important matter. It is right now the highest priority for Region 2, for my office in EPA Region 2. We've got a large team of staff who are working on various different elements here. Probably over 40, 45 people in my regional office that are working on one aspect or another of this Lime Tree Bay matter. We ultimately, the only way that if trust is to be reestablished or established, the only way that it can be done is not through our words, but through our actions. So I'm going to just ask you to watch this space and see if we, together with the Virgin Islands government, take action that can reestablish some trust and can establish some confidence.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank all of the people who joined. We appreciate your listening, and we want you to know that we are watching. And to close us out, I'd like to invite our partner, Summer Sibley Brown of the Good Food Coalition.
Good evening, everyone. Usually when I speak, I take the time to invite people to take a breath together, and somehow tonight, that doesn't seem like the encouragement I would give to people within a 10-mile radius of the refinery, and for our brothers and sisters in Frederiksted. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, community and panelists, for your time, your voice, your stories, your knowledge, and the grace and trust that you put in us as organizations to be a container for this conversation. I also want to take time to acknowledge that we are living and working in the lands of the Carib, Taino, Kalinago, and Arawakan-speaking people. And we are also foremost living in the lands of the secondary indigenous people, our ancestors, the enslaved people who are mostly from West Africa, who worked, lived, fought, and liberated themselves here on St. Croix. And I'm leading with this for two very specific reasons. One is because we can't erase people, we can't erase the past. So I'm acknowledging them because we all have the right to be acknowledged. We have the right to be heard, seen, respected, listened to. My second reason is because there's a legacy of resistance to oppression that still is coursing through the veins of this island, right? The vision of our ancestors, the foresight, the diligence, of what they did afforded us the right and the benefits to many liberties that we have today, even to be here, having these conversations, right? They gave us something, and it's our duty to pay it forward to future generations, that they have access to clean air, to clean water, to fish, to swim, to food, to good, healthy food. And so truthfully, tonight's town hall was about liberation. The topic was our environment. The topic was Lime Tree Bay Refinery. But tonight's town hall was about liberation for this community. It's about our community acknowledging its power and the right of the people of the Virgin Islands to breathe, to build, to create community, and one not a community that just maintains the minimum standards. We want to be the best standard of clean air, clean water, healthy living. We should be afforded the right to live in paradise, the paradise that people come on vacation at, the paradise that we're selling in commercials. That's not a paradise for guests. That's our ancestral right. That's the birthright of people who are born here, living here, loving here. Tonight's town hall was also an exercise in civic engagement, which is essential to building community, the community we all envision for ourselves and our family. So while I imagine there is so much more for us to discuss, right? And this platform didn't afford us all the opportunity or time necessary to say what needed to be said tonight. It was a first step. A first step that demanded first and foremost information, not innuendo, not rumors, but real facts. And that's information that is our right. It is our right to ask these questions. It is our right to have answers. It is our right to know where information is. Tonight's town hall was also an opportunity for us, community, to foster relationship among Virgin Islanders that spans across our difference and is centered in our common humanity, that is centered in our common love for this island and for each other. Tonight, 4 small grassroots organizations came together: St. Croix Foundation for Community Development, St. Croix Environmental Association, Crucian Nature and Heritage Tourism, and the Virgin Islands Good Food Coalition in partnership to be a container for a conversation. We fully understand that this has to be an ongoing conversation. So to that end, we plan to host 2 additional town halls to expand the conversation. And our topics are focused on the agricultural industry and the impact of heavy industry on our farmers, as Vision 2040 demands that the people demanded that agriculture and blue economies are a priority for the territory. So we have to take on what heavy industry, how those things partner with our vision. Then we're going to have a very special convening that's looking forward, looking to the future, and we're seeking public input around envisioning and reimagining economically viable, environmentally sustainable alternatives. A lot of people think that this conversation has to has to maintain in heavy industry and petrochemicals because it's the only way they can see forward. But together, the 263 people who were at one point on this call have the opportunity to dream a new path forward. Tonight's town hall was also an opportunity for me to put out a charge for us, the environmental sector of the St. Croix Nonprofit Consortium, to put out a charge on first, it's 4 things and then I'm done, to share information. Each one of us has access to resources. We have a responsibility to share those fact-based resources and information to help others learn and to cut through the gaslighting and disinformation. Please call your elected officials and make your voice and your requests known that you are demanding accountability and tell them what the vision is you want for the territory. There is a charge for documentation. Continue to use and call all those hotlines, local and federal, to document the incidents and experiences. And I also encourage you to keep your own personal logs that document odors, symptoms, and phone calls and medical visits as a checks and balance to what our governments are reporting. And also please complete our community comment survey, right? Where you have the ability to be an anonymous contributor to share what is happening to you. And that will be found on our Engage VI website. And lastly, go to Engage VI. We've created a website, right, that is intended to be, it's in its first iteration of what we hope it would become, but it is a platform for civic engagement. It is not solely focused on this issue that we're discussing tonight, but it will absolutely have information about the refinery on it and the incidents, the health study report, and please feel free to submit information to us that we can place on the site, right? Our knowledge is power. And so as I close, I want to give light and love and blessings to all of you. And I know tonight's town hall was a lot of information, but I hope you leave it feeling informed and powerful in a way that helps to harness our collective voices to speak truth to power and demand what we deserve and embrace our courage to act in our own best interest and in the best interest of your great-grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you all and have a good night. Thank you, Summer. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Good night. Good evening.
Good night, all.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Good night.